Hello everyone and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. The last rays of sunlight bled into the horizon as Jenna stood at the edge of Blackwood Woods, the sprawling forest that loomed ominously beside her hometown. Desolation draped over the landscape like a shroud, just as her past hung over her, heavy and unyielding. It had been 10 years since she moved away. Anna, her younger sister's disappearance etched into her psyche like a brand. Now she had returned on the anniversary of that fateful day, a quest for answers driving her forward, even as senses whispered for her to turn back. A chill brushed against her skin, a premonition of unease in the crisp autumn air. The scent of damp earth mixed with the sweet decay of leaves underfoot, creating a symphony of sensations that tugged at her memories. Each step deeper into the woods brought the sound of her heartbeat echoing in her ears, louder than the rustling leaves or distant caw of crows circling overhead. As the sun dipped further, shadows veiled the trees, twisting their forms into grotesque figures that seemed to watch Jenna's every move. She pressed on, her resolve tethered to an unanswered question that gnawed at her. What had happened to Anna? Hours passed, but the woods swallowed the light with an insatiable hunger. Jenna's phone buzzed in her pocket, illuminating faintly against the growing darkness. But the call went to voicemail. She cursed under her breath. The labyrinth of trees felt alive now, their very essence pulsing with a disquieting energy that set her hair on end. Memories of her sister's laughter flitted through her mind, fragile and desperate, as the forest began to warp around her, every familiar path shifting into something malevolent. As Jenna stumbled deeper into the heart of Blackwood, a soft whisper danced through the branches, barely more than a breeze, yet heavy with intent. It coiled around her thoughts, an invitation and a warning wrapped in one unsettling melody. There, amidst the thicket, lay a clearing, the remnants of an old campfire circled by stone, charred wood still giving off the faintest trace of smoke. Her breath hitched. Had Anna lit this fire? All she could see were the shadows of memories clawing at her, teasing fragments of joy turned to dread. It was then she noticed the photographs, pinned against the bark of a twisted old tree. Her heart raced as she approached, recognizing their faces. Children from her school, some from years before. They had played in these woods, smiled at birthday parties, but they all shared something darker. Each had gone missing for a span of time, some never returning. The realization sunk into her bones, solidifying fear into a cold dread, a thick fog rolling through the clearing. Something in the air shifted, as if the woods were laughing at her ignorance, reveling in the chorus of her mounting terror. A rustle broke the silence behind her, and she spun, heart pounding like a war drum. Nothing. Only the incessant thrum of the forest's heartbeat echoed around her. But as she turned back, shadows shifted again in the corner of her eye. A figure emerged at the edge of the clearing, veiled in darkness, or perhaps formed of it. Jenna's breath caught, pulses aligning with the rhythm of uncertainty as her thoughts raced to what Anna might have become. Driven by both fear and a desperate yearning for connection, Jenna called out her sister's name, the sound swallowed whole by the encroaching gloom. The moment felt suspended in time, the air thick and warm as though the forest itself held its breath. The figure stirred, stepping into a shard of moonlight, and the face that was revealed ignited both recognition and dread. It was Anna, though, not as she remembered. her features contorted, eyes dark as bottomless pits, a grotesque mimicry of the girl Jenna once cherished. Jenna staggered back, a scream lodged in her throat as Anna beckoned her forward with a repetitive, jointed motion. The woods lurched around her, twining each tree into a mass of despair and allure, whispering promises of reunion and severance. What had the forest done to her sister? What kind of malevolent force claimed the children within its depths? The ground felt unstable underfoot, softening into a mire of leaves and treachery as fear transformed into primal instinct. In a chilling revelation, the twisted figures of the others began to emerge from the dark, each one cradling the same soulless Gersar. They formed a circle around Jenna, shadows weaving together until reality blurred into a surreal tapestry of nightmares. Jenna turned to run, to escape the haunting tableau of familiar yet fearsome faces. But the ground drew her in like quicksand, roots tangling around her ankles, pulling her closer to them with a strength that was both physical and ethereal. Each child's voice fused into one haunting song, a cacophony of voices that cursed the darkness and cried for release. In a desperate, frenzied bid for survival, Jenna clawed at the earth, but it consumed her, dragging her down into its earthy mouth, suffocating her in its embrace. Memories spiraled out of control, mundane moments twisted grotesquely, laughter echoing with mania, her sister's face fading into indistinct horror as Jenna sank deeper. With a final panicked scream, the ground closed over her, the forest swallowing her whole as the shadows danced with glee, the only witness to her fears. As silence settled, a new photograph joined the gory gallery on the ancient tree's bark. Jenna's face, a twisted reflection of her former self, smiled back, an unsettling reminder of lost innocence and the sinister embrace of the woods. The breeze whispered once more, carrying the children's laughter, echoing through the branches as night deepened, leaving Blackwood Woods a predator eternally, searching for its next lost soul. The bitter wind slashed through the streets of Cragbourne, a dying town where memories lingered like shadows in the alleys. It thrummed with an unsettling tension, a sense of something monstrous lurking beneath the crumbling facades. Ellie, a young woman returning after years spent in the city, felt the weight of the silence as she parked her car outside the abandoned cultural hall, which had once hosted vibrant gatherings and laughter. Now its shattered windows resembled empty eyes, reflecting the darkness of her past. She was drawn to it, compelled by a strange nostalgia that twisted her stomach. As Ellie stepped inside, a musty scent enveloped her, clinging to her skin and making her shiver. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, filtering through cracks in the walls, illuminating faded posters that promised joy, but now served as spectral reminders of gatherings long forgotten. She could almost hear the echoes of music and laughter, but the exhilarating warmth turned to ice when she noticed the floor. A simple carpet speckled with dark patches that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. She stepped back, the floorboards creaking with protest, filling the silence with a groan that felt alive. The townspeople had never spoken of the hall after it fell into neglect. All Ellie remembered was the hushed whispers that hinted at a tragedy. A fire, an accident, a missing group of revelers. Her heart raced as she took in the peeling wallpaper, the cobwebbed chandeliers hanging like twisted bones from the ceiling. Something was buried in the air here, a pulse of resentment, of sorrow, lurking just beyond the veil of her understanding. With each step deeper into the hall, she felt as if the shadows were gathering, eager to reclaim what they lost. In the center of the ballroom, she saw an ancient piano, its keys yellowed and cracked, yet untouched by time's decay. As if it had been waiting for her, The instrument beckoned with an alluring promise. She approached, trembling, and hesitantly pressed a key, producing a hollow note that shuddered through the damp air. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a chill slithered down her spine, causing her to clasp her arms tightly as if to shield herself from unseen eyes. In that moment, a memory surged. An image of her younger self attending a farewell party with friends, laughter echoing, and a sense of belonging that now felt painfully distant. Something in the air shifted. Ellie turned to leave, heart racing, but as she stepped back, a strange light flickered in the corner of her vision. A shadow flickered just beyond the tattered curtains at the far end of the hall, and with it came a whisper that curled like smoke around her mind, seductive yet sinister. She squinted, peering into the dimness, the fabric of reality seeming to thin. She needed to escape, but an irresistible pull drew her closer, unearthing a magnetic bond to the past that she wished to unearth. As she neared the curtains, a low rumble vibrated through the floor, resonating in her chest like the growl of a distant beast. The whispers grew louder, no longer words but a cacophony of emotions. Laughter turned to cries and joy faded into lament. Panic knotted in her stomach. As she stumbled back, the fabric of her once simple memories now frayed and twisted, churning as if alive. The air reeked of smoke and something more acrid like decay, mingling with the sweet, sickly scent of nostalgia, forcing her to gag. Ellie turned on her heel, desperate to escape the spiraling madness she had unwittingly awakened. But the hall seemed to stretch before her, shifting like a living organism, walls warping, the very air constricting around her. Desperation clawed at her throat as she stumbled toward the entrance, but the shadows preyed upon her thrashing heart, closing in, thickening the darkness. Her pulse quickened in response, a primal understanding coursing through her veins. She was not merely an interloper. She was part of the town's tapestry, a thread woven into its fabric of grief. In her frantic flight, Ellie spotted a doorway ajar, a glimpse of light spilling across the floor. She darted toward it, one slight hope in a sea of despair, but upon crossing the threshold she found herself in a dilapidated hallway, lined with portraits that seemed to shift subtly, faces watching with faded curiosity. The light flickered, uncertainly, threatening to extinguish, and just as despair spiraled deeper, she caught a glimpse of herself in a shattered mirror embedded in the wall. What she saw was not her face, but a reflection of blended pasts, friends she had lost, moments she buried deep, and an identity fragmented beyond recognition. An icy hand gripped her heart as she turned away, but she soon realized that the warmth of her own breath no longer reached her ears. The pulse of time felt suspended, hovering on the precipice of something unspeakable. The portraits hung like judicial figures, and Ellie could swear their eyes glistened with tears, mirror images of her own sorrows folded into their expressions. Suddenly, the hall enveloped her entirely, dissolving the space between past and present until Ellie became only a fragment of her former self, lost and disembodied. Ellie pressed on, guided by dread more real than the texture of her skin. The back of the hall led to a room choked by the remnants of a forgotten celebration, the remains of a banquet spilled across tables. The stench of rot clawed at her throat as a shadow flickered in the periphery, a dull thud echoing behind her. She turned just in time to see a figure, a face she knew all too well, a friend lost long ago, eyes hollow but filled with an unbearable yearning. The moment stretched impossibly, yet the whimpering noise, pleading and desolate, pierced her heart, tethering her to the secrets of the hall. As doubt and fear merged into clarity, Ellie realized the truth ensnaring her. The town had never truly forgotten their lost ones. The fire had claimed not just lives, but their very essence, binding them to the hall in a grotesque semblance of life. She was not merely returning to a town she had left behind. She had been beckoned back, a moth, to the flame of their collective regret. The joyous memories she chased were marred by a darkness she had tried desperately to escape. Cragborn needed to be fed, and her unresolved pain was the banquet they craved. The realization shattered Ellie's mind like glass. Heat surged around her, suffocating, enveloping her in the flames of their despair. She raced back to the exit, terror clawing at her throat. Yet the once familiar path twisted, shadows coiled around her, igniting her skin with memories. Laughter that turned to screams, the weight of sorrow pressing just beyond her touch. As she burst through the doorway into the cool night air, a wind howled in fury behind her. Those lost souls, now ravenous specters, surged to reclaim their own. Standing on the doorstep of the hall, Ellie felt the pulse of the town beneath her feet, the beating heart deeply entwined with her own. She was part of them now, woven into the fabric of Cragborn, entangled with the whispers of what should have never been spoken. The air throbbed with a hate twisted into love, and as she sank to her knees, her laughter joined the echoes haunting the empty streets. The town, once a monument to loss, now beat in time with her own heart, and the dark shadows began to waltz in the light. Silently, Ellie became the ambassador of their torment, relishing in the horror of returning home as the night swallowed them whole. The scent of damp earth hung thickly in the air, weaving through the tall grass like a forgotten whisper. As Rebecca trudged onward, her heart quickening with every rustle in the underbrush. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell her, tales of the forest that loomed just outside their small town, tales of those who wandered in and never returned. Yet today, burdened by the weight of her mother's recent passing and the cacophony of unresolved grief, she sought solace among the trees, believing she could find clarity in their whispers. The sun clung to the horizon, casting a halo of orange light through the advancing shadows, but Rebecca pressed forward, driven by a desire to escape the suffocating atmosphere of her home, where memories clung to the walls like cobwebs. Each step deeper into the woods brought an increasing chill that pricked at her skin, making her long for the embrace of familiarity. The trees grew denser, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, scratching the sky as if seeking release from an unseen torment. That night, as twilight consumed the forest, the silence enveloped her. It was an uncanny stillness punctuated only by the occasional whisper of wind or the distant call of a nightbird. The unsettling feeling that she was not alone seeped into her bones, a quiet yet consuming panic that prickled at the nape of her neck. She found an ancient oak, its gnarled roots forming a natural seat, and settled down, hoping that the rhythmic pulse of the earth beneath her would bring some semblance of peace. Instead, the ground felt alive, thrumming with an energy she couldn't comprehend. Just as she closed her eyes, a soft voice seemed to echo through the trees, laced with longing. It beckoned her, a melodic hum that felt oddly familiar, yet distant. The call tugged at her heart, stirring up lost memories, awakening a sense of urgency that compelled her to rise. Despite her trepidation, she followed the sound deeper into the woods, heart racing, each step a battle against both the unseen presence at her back and her growing curiosity. What she discovered was a clearing shrouded in an ethereal glow, the moonlight streaming through the canopy like pale fingers. In its center stood a stone altar, ancient and weathered, adorned with wilted flowers and dark stains that suggested offerings long forgotten. The voice grew stronger, coiling around her like smoke, pulling her closer as her gut twisted with both intrigue and inexplicable dread. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, flickering and morphing into shapes that felt both foreign and disturbingly familiar. Something unnameable awakened within her as she approached the altar. A connection, forged through loss, the loss of her mother, her childhood, her very self. The energy felt pulsing now, thrumming against her skin like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. Then, before she could retreat, a figure coalesced from the shadows, its outline blurring as it stepped forward. It was a woman, wreathed in darkness, her features obscured, yet Rebecca felt the unmistakable warmth of recognition in her chest. It was her mother, or the ghost of her mother, a twisted reflection of loss and longing. "I have waited for you," the figure whispered, the sound a dissonance that clawed at Rebecca's sanity. It beckoned her closer, the allure of reunion overwhelming her caution. Dread gripped her heart as she stepped forward, her eyes locked into the dark void where her mother's face should have been, a vortex of solace and horror drawing her near. Whispers from the otherworldly depths invited her to relinquish her grief, promising to console her sorrow. But as she reached the altar, the figure began to dissolve, revealing a mass of writhing, shadowy tendrils beneath. The ethereal voice, twisted into a cacophony of sorrowful wails, the promise of comfort morphing into an unbearable anguish as she realized what lay hidden in the depths of the darkness. It was not comfort she sought. It was a connection that demanded sacrifice. The air thickened with despair, her mother's presence now an ominous reminder of the price she would pay for seeking solace. The shadows whispered of those who ventured too close, luring them into a web of despair and madness. Rebecca stumbled, backward, desperation clawing at her throat as the sorrow of countless lost souls enveloped her. The trees seemed to loom closer, the forest itself shifting, as if orchestrating a grotesque dance around her. The shadows pulsed and flared, revealing glimpses of those who had been ensnared here, their faces twisted in anguish, forever bound to this place. Fleeing became a frantic blur, a desperate race against the encroaching darkness as the mournful specter of her mother wailed from the depths, the shadows haunting her like the echoes of her memories. Branches clawed at her skin, sharp and insistent, as she ran, her heart pounding in time with the dissonant rhythm of the forest. She was not merely fleeing from the shadow, but from the very essence of her grief, the inescapable truth that loss twisted into something monstrous when left unchecked. When she broke free from the tree line, panting and disoriented, dawn teetered on the horizon, mingling shadows with the first light of day. The familiar path home lay before her, but the world felt altered, each sound sharper, each color too vivid, as if she had stepped into a painting where the vibrancy of life clashed with the stark reality she had experienced. The warmth of sunlight felt alien on her skin, an unwelcome reminder of the darkness she carried within. As she returned to her quiet home, the memories flooded in, but they were not comforting. They were stark and raw. Visions of her mother's face now laced with the shadows of the forest. Every corner of the house felt like a reminder of what she had sought and failed to find. Her mother's presence was forever entwined with the wretched cries of the sorrowful spirits she had glimpsed. The once comforting space now stood as a prison, suffocating and cold, memories shifting into nightmares at the periphery of her mind. In her dreams, the shadows beckoned, whispering of release, a sway of familiar entrapment that kept her awake at night. Was it her mother she had seen, or merely a reflection of her own longing for connection against the gnawing emptiness of grief? Each night, the forest called to her, and with each sleepless hour, Rebecca felt herself drawn back to the clearing. The altar a siren promising solace only to ensnare her deeper in its grasp. Weeks turned to months, and as she succumbed to the whispers, echoes of those long vanished consumed her thoughts. Desperate, she returned to the forest, the call growing stronger, the shadows more seductive. This time she no longer fled but embraced the darkness, surrendering her soul to the swirling mass of energies, hoping to find her mother in the depths, if only to quell the ever-growing void inside her. As Rebecca stepped into the clearing once more, she understood with terrifying clarity that she had become one of those lost souls, bound to the advancing darkness. The shadows welcomed her, their tendrils weaving around her, marrying her grief to theirs in a way that felt both horrifying and liberating. The altar stood ready, a place of offering, and as she became one with the shadows, she realized the truth. There was no escape from such a profound loneliness, only acceptance in the chilling embrace of the forest. In the quiet aftermath, the wind whispered her name, laced with the sorrowful calls of those who had come before her, a haunting reminder that the cost of seeking connection could twist into something far more grotesque than the loneliness she had known. As dawn broke, once again over the trees, the clearing lay empty save for a feeling, a lingering essence of grief wrapped in shadows, waiting for the next lost soul to embrace its call. In the forgotten corners of the old town of Eldridge, where vibrant green vines choked the crumbling facades of Yellowstone buildings, a mysterious fog crept in as autumn settled heavily over the land. The air was thick with a curious chill that spoke of secrets long buried beneath the rotting wood and cracked glass. It was here that Eleanor Hartley, a once promising artist who had retreated from the world after tragedy, came to seek solitude and inspiration. Looking for a fresh start, she rented a dilapidated cottage on the town's outskirts, unknowing of the darkness that lay within its walls. From her first night, the cottage seemed alive with whispers she could not understand, a soft murmur that echoed in the hollow spaces of her mind. Shadows danced just beyond her line of vision, flickering under the faint moonlight that leaked through the grime-splattered windows. The walls, though worn and stained, felt like old friends. Yet they harbored unseen eyes watching, waiting. The townsfolk, when she ventured into the market, offered furtive glances and muttered warnings. "Stay on the path," they would say, their voices flitting away like startled birds. Eleanor dismissed their warnings, attributing their paranoia to superstition. Within her first weeks, the decline of her sanity began with small, unexplainable occurrences. Paint splattered across her canvas in colors she hadn't chosen, portraying grotesque figures that seemed to shift and writhe. Night after night, shapes took form, each more sinister than the last, pulling images from her fractured memories. The wind outside would howl ominously, a sound that gnawed at her confidence, reminding her of the car accident that had stolen away her younger brother, the last person capable of breaking through her self-imposed isolation. Eleanor painted feverishly, obsessively, to drown out the whispers that seeped into her thoughts. One particularly stormy night, as rain lashed against her window like a child's angry fist, she caught a glimpse of something pale darting between the trees in the forest behind her cottage. It was fleeting, but undeniable. The next day, driven by a waking nightmare, she trekked into the woods, feeling the damp earth swallow her feet. Shadows loomed ahead, stretching out like skeletal fingers, leading her deeper into the thicket. An unnatural fog curled around her ankles, the oppressive silence broken only by the thump of her racing heart. As she wandered, a sense of being followed gnawed at her spine. The very trees seemed to lean in, their knotted branches whispering secrets she was not meant to hear. And then it came. She stumbled upon an abandoned well, bricks half crumbling, its depths beckoning. A tangled mass of dark hair peered up from the opening, twining through the cracks like roots searching for light. Instinct screamed for her to flee, yet she was irresistibly drawn closer, entranced by the hollow echo that resonated from within. The days turned into nightmares, slipping seamlessly from reality like water through her fingers. Eleanor could hardly tell if she was painting the well or the well was painting her. Vibrant colors twisted into chaotic nightmares that spilled from her brush, and soon, she could not bring herself to create anything that didn't make her want to retch. Her sleep was punctuated by visions of her brother, lost yet a part of the art that should have liberated her, but instead entangled her deeper in despair. One evening, as the sun set in a spectral crimson glow, the cottage felt suffocating. The whispers had turned into dissonant voices, urging her to look into the well once more. Late that night, when she could no longer fight the compulsion, she grabbed an old lantern and crept outside, the light flickering like her wavering resolve. The air was unnaturally still, and dread swept over her like a veil, smothering her. Peering over the edge of the well, she expected the darkness to be endless, but to her horror, it shimmered with a sickly luminescence. Faces began to appear beneath the surface, hers, her brother's, and others she didn't recognize. Their expressions twisted in a deep anguish, mouths moving silently in frozen screams. Backing away, breath quickening, Eleanor tripped, the lantern extinguishing on impact, plunging her into a surreal darkness. The forest around her seemed to breathe, each rustling leaf whispering her name, yet she could feel no hands to clasp. Desperation clawed at her as she scrambled back toward the cottage, but the trees closed in, roots wrapping like serpents around her feet. The figures in the well taunted her, drawing nearer, their hollow eyes hungry for release from their ghastly entrapment. And what of her own fate? She had created them, had given them life on canvas. Realization crashed over her. She wasn't just fleeing from them, she was escaping herself. Eleanor burst into the fading light of her home, panting heavily, surrounded by swirling shadows. The walls began to tremble as the paintings writhed like live things, faces and features distorting in grotesque mockery. She grabbed brushes and painted furiously, the strokes desperate, frantic, a plea for them to retreat, to vanish into the darkness from which they had come. But each stroke only gave birth to more horrors, colors swirling and splatting across the canvas in ecstatic agony. In the depth of madness, she finally understood the truth. A part of her had always been with the figures, the darkness weaving through her veins, promising solace in exchange for something more. The cottage creaked ominously as the walls began to ripple, closing in around her, and she was left entrapped within the endless cycle of creation and destruction, her screams merging with the cries of those she had painted. The darkness rose, surging like a wave, swallowing her whole. With a soft thud, the lantern rolled by the well, the light flickering back to life, casting grotesque shadows on the outside world. The town of Eldridge remained blissfully unaware, woven snugly within the embrace of its own history, as new whispers spread among the townsfolk of the artist who had gone mad, a tale to churn just beneath the surface, waiting for the next curious soul to venture into the woods to seek the truth hidden in the well of despair.